Town Council for Monday, May 31st, 2021. I'd like to start off the meeting with the singing of our national anthem. Got that teed up?
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you to David Nairn, Artistic Director of Theatre Orangeville, for that rendition of our national anthem. I'd like to acknowledge our Indigenous peoples. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. Due to efforts to contain the spread of COVID-19 and to protect all individuals, the council chambers at Town Hall will not be open to the public to attend council meetings until further notice. Members of the public who have an interest in a matter listed on the agenda may, up until 10 a.m. on the day of a scheduled council meeting, email councilagenda@orangeville.ca indicating your request to speak to a matter listed on the agenda. A phone number and conference ID code will be provided to you so you may join the virtual meeting and provide your comments to council. Members of the public wishing to raise a question during the public question period of the council meeting may, beginning at 8:15 on the evening of the council meeting, call 1-289-801-5774 and enter conference ID 284-898-293 #. Correspondence and emails submitted will be considered as public information and entered into the public record. If you require access to information in an alternate format, please contact the Clerk's Division by phone 519-941-0440 extension 2256 or via email at clerksdepartment@orangeville.ca. This meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Before we get into the regular agenda, there were a couple of very sad events that we were made aware of in the last week or so. The first one was the passing of one of our important community icons, Pete Renshaw. Pete was a supporter of business here in town, and he also was a member of the board of directors of Family Transition Place. I'm going to ask Councillor Joe Andrews, who knew Pete well, who worked with him on a number of committees, and to say a few words. Councillor Andrews.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship. We did lose Pete on May 28th this past week. A wonderful human being and someone who was really an inspiration to many of us who've had the pleasure and honor to work with him in a variety of capacities over the years. As you did mention, he was a board member, in fact, the first male board president, I should say, of FTP, was the chair of the Dufferin Board of Trade, formerly the Chamber of Commerce. Had the pleasure of having him as my co-chair for a number of years with the Business Economic Development Advisory Committee, and really an individual who meant so much to this community for a number of years. Not only his smile, but his quick wit is something many of us will remember. So on behalf of council and the town of Orangeville, our thoughts are with Pete Runshaw's family, including his wife Brenda, his children Scott and Cheryl, and his grandchildren Liam, Colby, as well as Madison. And I know that many of you who knew Pete well think very similar to the comments that I've made, but there will be an opportunity for the community to remember Pete in some way, as there will be. Well,
Where's that coming from, Dan?
I don't. There we go.
Okay.
Just to conclude, Your Worship, I know that there will be many in the community who will remember Pete in some way. There will be additional announcements to come on a gathering and other ways to honor quite a remarkable man.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Yes, condolences to his family for sure. The other sad news that was reported in the last few days was the issue of the remains of 215 Indigenous children at the residential school in Kamloops. Very disturbing news. I know there will be a full and complete investigation of this, and we're looking forward to the results of that. Councillor Post had reached out to council last night recommending flag lowering. Things progressed very quickly. We were thinking we were going to talk about it, the flag lowering, I should say, at our meeting tonight, but the federal government had decided to lower flags at all federal buildings, and Dufferin County also made that decision last night. So this morning, CAO Ed Brennan and myself talked, and as did Councillor Post, and the decision was taken early to move ahead with the lowering of flags. But Councillor Post, I wanted to call on you to expand upon that and talk a little bit further, if you would.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just wanted to say a couple of words. As Canadians, we should be appalled by the discovery of the remains of these 215 Indigenous children who sadly never made it home from school. We should be dismayed, we should be horrified, and we should be heartbroken, but sadly we shouldn't be shocked. And we should prepare ourselves because it has been reported that this is likely just the tip of the iceberg. Lowering our flags in memory of these children is a nice gesture and an important one as we mourn as a nation. But we can't stop at lowering flags. We all need to collectively make a promise right here and right now that we will take meaningful action to ensure that an atrocity like this can never happen again. We need to take steps to learn about our history and, more importantly, to learn from our history. We need to acknowledge the truth, never deny it, and every time you drive by one of the flags that are lowered to half-mast, think about these children, because we can never forget them. I would like to thank Town of Orangeville staff for taking quick action this morning to lower our flags at all municipal facilities. And tonight, I would like to propose to Council that our flags remain at half-mast for 215 hours, 1 hour for every child whose remains were found in Kamloops, British Columbia. I'd like to thank you for your consideration, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Post. That I think would be approved unanimously by our council, and thank you for making that that request. Let's move along in the agenda. We earlier this evening we had a closed meeting, and during that meeting there were a couple of issues that were discussed. A recommendation that the minutes of the April 26, 2021 closed meeting be approved, and that correspondence from the Ministry for Seniors and Accessibility regarding Provincial Seniors Award, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, regarding the Provincial Seniors Award nomination be received. What was discussed is we found out about these awards very late in the decision-making process, and that we have not had an opportunity to reach out to the community because of the late notice. And we've decided that we're going to forego the Provincial Seniors Award in Orangeville this year and defer to 2022 and make sure that we do have the proper time to reach out to the community and get applications and recommendations for awards to seniors in our community. Also, that a confidential report, CAO 2021-07, regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, public office holders, Orangeville Hydro Services, be received, and that John Thornton be removed as Director of Orangeville Hydro Services, Inc., and the Council appoints Rob Kokoch as Director of the Orangeville Hydro Services, Inc., and that Council authorize the Director to take all necessary proceedings for the dissolution of the corporation pursuant to the provisions of the Business Corporations Act of Ontario, and to prepare articles of dissolution for filing pursuant to the Act. And the costs related to the dissolution of the corporation be assumed by the town, and that staff proceed as directed. Moving on to Madam Deputy Clerk, do we need to vote on that in open?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
All right. So we have a motion to approve those 3 items. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Peters. Any further comment, councillors? All in favor?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Also, we have, moving on, item 10. This is the adoption of minutes of previous council meetings, and we need a motion. The minutes of the meeting of May the 10th, 2021 be approved. May I have a motion for that? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Any errors or omissions, councillors? Seeing none, all in favor?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to item 11, we have presentations, petitions, and delegations. Starting off, 11.1, we have Murray Short from the accounting firm of RLB, and Nandini Syed, our treasurer, to present our 2020 financial statements. Madam Treasurer, do you wish to speak first? No. Go ahead. Mr. Short.
Okay, thank you very much, Your Worship, members of council. Thanks for the opportunity to present the draft audited financial statements for the town of Orangeville for the year ended 2020, December 31st, 2020. I will just share my screen here if I can. Just give me 1 second. Okay, can everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. I just lost sight of everybody, so I wasn't too sure. Excellent. So this is the just a couple slides that we have to start, just to explain the cash surplus for the town for the year. So moving on to the second slide here, this is just a very high level synopsis of the cash or operating surplus for the town. You'll see on page number 27 of the financial statements, page 48 of the council package, that the operating fund or general fund is showing a surplus of $3.3 million. However, there is kind of a caveat to that, which is that because of the excess or the loan that was taken in the year to fund severance related to Orangeville Police Services and the transition of police services to the OPP, that basically is inflating the surplus by $1.4 million, leaving kind of a net cash surplus, ignoring that amount, of about $1.9 million. And just to show how that compares, it's very comparable to where the surplus has been over the last 3 years. So just wanted to kind of point out that fact before we get into the financial statements themselves. So moving on to the financial statements. The audit report itself is over 2 pages, pages 6 and 7 of the financial statements. That would be pages 24 and 25 of the council package. Most importantly for tonight's discussion is the opinion paragraph second paragraph in the report where we're concluding that the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So that's the clean audit opinion you're looking for from us. We've been through our audit process, worked with the treasurer and finance staff and the rest of the staff at the town as needed to reach the point where we're able to present these draft financial statements and make that opinion or that conclusion on the financial statements. The rest of the audit report gives some information on various responsibilities, the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance, as well as our responsibility as your auditors, which carries on to the second page. The report is tentatively dated today's date, subject to review and approval by council. And should council approve the financial statements after this presentation, then we will provide the final signed copy of the financial statements and audit report.
Excuse me, Mr. Short, are you able to make the screen any larger?
I sure can, yes.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
that's a bit better.
Yes.
I think that's probably
Yes.
as big as I can do it. Okay.
Thank you.
The next page is the statement of financial position. The more commonly used term is the balance sheet for the town, which highlights the assets, liabilities, and the overall accumulated surplus for the town at the December 31st, 2020 and 2019 year ends. So just a few comments here. Top three lines are cash and investments. So looking at them collectively, the total is about $77.8 million at the end of 2020. Corresponding number for 2019 was about 67.3. So that's an increase of about $10.5 million. Primary reason for that is because of the increase in reserves and reserve funds that we'll get to when we get to one of the schedules. But also, as I mentioned, the fact that cash is somewhat overstated or inflated by that extra debt that was taken to help fund the severance related to Orangeville Police Service. And that's why you can see this long-term debt line has increased by about $3.5 million from the prior year. Other financial assets you can see are fairly consistent, a bit of an increase in both taxes receivable and accounts receivable at the end of the year. And the investment in government business enterprises is the investment in Orangeville Hydro and the increase there related to your share of its income on the year. Under liabilities, you can see liabilities are up by about $7 million. Part of that is the long-term debt that I mentioned, the new loan taken, and part of that is accounts payable, just a timing thing in terms of payments going out the door. There's more capital expenditures outstanding at the end of 2020 than there were at the end of 2019. But then also with the contracting of OPP services, there's a payable to the provincial government for that at the end of the year as well. So the net of your financial assets and liabilities is your net financial assets. That balance has increased to the tune of about $4.5 million. And then down below, we have the non-financial assets, most of which is your investment in your tangible capital assets, your roads and buildings and water system and all those sorts of things, which increased, you can see, by about $2.5 million from the last year. And the net of all of those things is the accumulated surplus up to about $236 million, part of that being your tangible capital asset increase. And part, as I mentioned, was an increase in the reserves and reserve funds that we'll get to shortly. The next page is the statement of operation showing revenues and expenses for the year, or expenditures as we have it here. You can see taxation revenue up by about 3.5%. So that's kind of fairly consistent, what we would expect to see. Other revenues, you can see some changes, fees and user charges not surprisingly being down, with some of the impacts of COVID being kind of reductions in services and those sorts of things. We would certainly expect to see a reduction in some of those fees and user charges, particularly as it relates to things like recreation with some of the closures and so on that happened in the year. Grants are up. And we'll get to a note that kind of shows that balance, but a mix of different things that created that about $1.4 or $1.5 million increase in grants. Other income down by about 1.1, and again, there's a note to kind of explain that. And then we have your income from Orangeville Hydro, as mentioned, about $1 million this year. And in total, revenues up very slightly from last year, about just under $200,000. On the expense side, you can see an increase of about $6 million, most of that being related to protection services. You can see an increase of almost $6 million in that line alone, again, related to the transition of Orangeville Police, severance costs, transition costs, all those sorts of things that's creating that increase. And so the net annual surplus on the year is about $7 million. Part of that used to fund capital asset additions, as I'll show on the next page. And the net increase then is your increase to your accumulated surplus up to that 235 million, I should say, that we saw on the last page. So the next page is the statement of changes in net financial assets. So this starts with the surplus that I mentioned of just under $7 million, and then shows the impacts of your tangible capital asset activity. So amortization at about 7.7, typically very consistent from one year to the next. But what isn't consistent often is acquisition. Some years you'll have significant acquisitions, some years somewhat less. This year, about $10.2 million. That's a decrease in your net financial assets as you're converting some of those cash and other financial assets into capital assets. And that's why your net financial asset position increased as a result of the surplus, but not by as much as the surplus. So your net financial asset position did increase overall. And then we have the statement of cash flows, again, starting with the annual surplus on the year, showing the impact of working capital and financing activities. With the new loan taken, your overall debt increased by $3.5 million, which is an increase in your cash position. And then from that, you finance those capital asset additions as mentioned. And as a result, your cash position increased by about $10.5 million. And again, we have the split between cash, restricted cash, and investments. So the next several pages are notes. There's a lot of information on accounting policies, which I will skip over. And get to more of the notes that give some more detail on some of the balances in the financial statements. Temporary investments shows just that of the $14.3 million, it's split between a money market fund and term deposits, which are guaranteed investments with set interest rates, so conservatively invested, and an increase there of about $200,000 over the year. The investment in government business enterprises just shows your investment in Orangeville Hydro, and then Orangeville Hydro Services as well, which is essentially inactive. And the increase in your net equity is because of your surplus on the year. This note also shows the expenses paid to Orangeville Hydro on the year because it's a related party, so we're required to disclose that. There's a note on promissory notes just paid down over the course of this one's repayment schedule. And there's a long-term debt note for the rest of the debt that I'll show momentarily. We have deferred revenue. These are your development charges, gas tax, and other things. You can see that balance is very consistent year over year. The obligatory reserve funds decreasing slightly from 19.76 million to 19.4. And then other reserve funds increasing slightly. So overall, your deferred revenue has increased by about $220,000. There's some other obligations for post-employment costs. So there's that amount is sitting as a liability on the statement of financial position. We just show the changes in those in the year, up very slightly. And that's based on kind of actuarial assessments and so on. So that's that number there. Then we have the long-term debt note. So this shows the various loans that the town has, most of them repaid over the course of their regular repayment schedules. And then lastly, at the bottom of the page here, we have that new loan that I mentioned, $5 million, bringing the total on your loans up to just under 15 million from 11.5. And so that's the $3.5 million increase that that we showed because of about $1.5 million in repayments on the year. Pension agreements just says that the municipality contributes to the OMERS retirement plan on behalf of various employees, shows the amounts contributed and a bit of information about the plan itself. And then you have a landfill post-closure liability. It's a fairly small amount on the statement of financial position, but it's just kind of estimating the projected costs of closing and the liability to the town at this point in time. We have a note on the amounts raised for and paid out to the school boards in the county here, and you can see the balances from each of the last 2 years. Other income, as I mentioned, down somewhat. Decrease in money spent from your development charges and recreational land reserve funds, and that's the primary reason for the decrease, although you do see a decrease as well in investment income on the year, just because of the status or the amount earned on your investments. Grants, as mentioned, up by about $1.5 million, most of that coming from the province of Ontario, in particular related to transportation and protection grants. And so that balance up to 3.4 from 2.3 million. And you can see increases from federal government monies. That's money spent at your federal gas tax reserve fund of about $500,000, and then some other grants, which are very comparable to last year. Trust funds, there's separate statements for, so I'm going to skip over that note. And this just gives a bit more information on Orangeville Hydro, because the municipality does own the majority of shares from Orangeville Hydro. Then we're required to disclose just highlights of its own financial statements within yours. Note 16 gives a lot of information on financial instrument risk, just talks about kind of the maturities of some of your receivables or the timelines expected to collect, just for informational purposes. Same thing on the payable side, with long-term debt being extended out in some cases to beyond the 5-year mark. Note 17 is a budget note. It just ties in, basically it acknowledges the fact that the municipality budgets on a cash flow needed basis. That doesn't tie into what's presented in these financial statements, because they're presented under public sector accounting standards with amortization and so on, rather than cash required to fund your capital asset purchases and a number of other things. And so this is just a reconciliation to tie into that general surplus that I mentioned in the slides at the start of about $3.3 million. There's some commitments and so on that are noted here, just contracts for transit, haulage costs and different things that are disclosed. We have a note on COVID-19, just because of the impact and uncertainty that's causing on the economy and what the impact might be to the municipality, to some of its ratepayers and all those sorts of things. So it's just a generic note saying that there's a lot of uncertainty caused by the pandemic, and that the impacts of that heading into the future are uncertain. It's a note that just gives a lot of information on the various departments of the municipality. And then we get to some of the schedules, and I apologize, I'm trying to cover this fairly quickly here. I'm just going to make this a little bit smaller so that I can fit the whole slide on one page. Hopefully that's still okay for size. So this is the schedule of segmented disclosure. It breaks out the revenues and expenses by department. So on the statement of operations, we saw the revenues classified this way, which is by type with taxation and fees and user charges. The expenses were classified by department, which are down here. So this shows them by type and shows the revenues by department, just to give a fuller picture of where the revenues and expenses are coming from and going to, and the changes in those. This is the same schedule for 2019, just for comparative purposes. So the next schedule is a schedule of tangible capital assets, showing the changes in those by asset type. So as mentioned, about $10.2 million in additions, and you can see on the additions line how that's spread out across different types of assets, most of it going towards buildings, roads, and equipment, with some additional amounts for vehicles, water and sewer systems, and land improvements. And then same thing on the amortization side, the amortization spread out across the various types of assets as well, coming up to that total of $206.8 million. And the last schedule is the schedule of accumulated surplus. This shows how that 235 or 236 million is broken out. 206 or 207 is your investment capital assets. We have the reserves and reserve funds at the bottom, as mentioned, increasing by about $9.5 million. That's why your accumulated surplus or your annual surplus for the year was large. Your cash position has increased, and so on. And the general surplus, the 3.3 million that I mentioned at the outset, that's showing right here. The rest of the statements are just the trust funds. I'll just cover them on a very, very quick basis here. We do have the graphs showing some of the key operating measures, and I'm trying not to take too much of council's time. So this just shows the status of your various trust funds by type of trust fund, showing the assets and liabilities, and then the fund balances. And this page just shows the continuity of them, being the monies coming into and being paid out of those trust funds and the closing balances. So those are the financial statements. And then lastly, just some notes here in terms of the investments in the trust funds. Lastly, we have the graphs, but maybe I'll pause and see if there's any questions at this point. Otherwise, I can keep going and cover off the graphs as well.
Councillors, any questions of Mr. Short? Councillor Andrews, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, Your Worship. I have just one quick question, Mr. Short, and again, as much as you've gone through this in detail, it is a well-presented document, and again, I thank both you and the Treasurer. This was on page 39. This would be item number 12, under other income, and just wanted to be certain that the penalties and interest on taxation, this was in fact Council's deferral of any penalties that would have been applied to anyone who was late in filing any of their property taxes. Is that correct, under the actual 2020?
Yeah. So that balance or that penalties and interest revenue in 2019 was about 435,000. This year was down to about 90,000. You're right. That's exactly why.
Okay, that's all I had, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay.
Very good. Councillors, any other further questions at this moment? Seeing none, go ahead, Mr. Short.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. So as we presented in the past, we have some graphs which just show, take some of the numbers that I presented and maybe make them a little more readily understood, highlighting some of the key things that we think are important to your municipality in terms of the financial statements just presented. You may recall that at the meeting we presented at last year, we presented these graphs with comparatives from our client base, which admittedly is comprised primarily of smaller municipalities than yours. We audit a lot of the rural municipalities in Dufferin County and Wellington County. And so in some cases, it maybe wasn't the fairest comparison, and it was requested by council for us to present these relative to or compared to municipalities of similar size. So we've done that this year. We've looked at 3 or 4 municipalities larger than yours and 3 or 4 municipalities slightly smaller, but all within the same size range, so that we're hopefully providing a better comparison here. So
Mr. Short, could you make the screen larger so that perhaps the people at home can read it a little bit better?
Yes. Yeah, and I apologize. Some of the wording describing what's in the graphs is fairly small, so I do apologize for that. I may try and make it even bigger here if I can. Okay, so hopefully this is big enough when we get to the rest of the graphs. So this just shows expenditures by department. Being a diversified municipality, you can see that protection services is the largest expenditure, but you have significant expenditures in other departments as well, including transportation, recreation, environmental, and so on. And this shows the comparison over the past 5 years of the total expenditures by department. So this is a new graph we're presenting this year. It shows cash and cash equivalents as a percentage of annual cash outflows. As mentioned, with the increase in cash that you had in the year, the green line here suggests that your cash position is enough to cover 130% of your annual cash outflows. That said, we certainly wouldn't expect that you would spend your cash on that. You have obviously a fair amount invested in reserves and reserve funds and all those sorts of things. It's just showing kind of the cash position relative to the amount of money that goes out the door on an annual basis. And that position over the last couple of years has been better than the comparator group that we have of other municipalities of your size. This graph shows taxes receivable as a percentage of total tax levied. So the total tax levied is a means to normalize for size of municipality, but as mentioned, we are looking at comparably sized municipalities, and your taxes receivable is actually lower than the comparator group, and well within the low range for the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing's criteria for risk in terms of taxes receivable. So that certainly is very positive. The next graph shows long-term debt as a percentage of total tax revenue. So as mentioned, when we went through the statements, there are various loans that the municipality has taken over the years, but your debt load is lower than the average of our comparator group at about 40% of total tax revenue. That's what your long-term debt makes up as a percentage. The average of the comparator group is in the 66 or 7% range. So should you need to, you certainly have the capacity to take on more debt in the future. Certainly you are far from over leveraged from that standpoint. Comparing reserves and reserve funds, as mentioned, there has been increases in those over the last few years. And so as a result, again, higher than your comparator group. That means you have more set aside in those reserves and reserve funds than other municipalities. At about 183% as compared to at 162% or so for the comparator group. So a strong position from the reserves and reserve fund standpoint. So this graph shows capital asset additions as a percentage of total tax revenue. It does tend to be lower with the town of Orangeville. I do want to make it very clear, though, this is not a judgment call on how much you should have invested in capital asset additions. Or what your capital needs are relative to other municipalities. That would take an engineer to assess. I'm not an engineer and I wouldn't profess to be one. So this is just showing that you have spent less as a percentage of your total tax revenue on capital assets. But again, not a judgment call. And again, because of your debt position in your reserves and reserve funds, should you need to spend more on capital assets in the future, I think you're well positioned to do so. And this graph just shows capital asset additions versus budget and versus amortization. So the blue is your capital asset additions, and you can see how that has changed over the years. The green is the budget additions, and the yellow, which again is very constant at $7 to $8 million, is the amortization. Generally speaking, I would suggest that we would like to see most municipalities spending more on capital asset additions than amortization, and you can see that your municipality has in 4 out of the 5 years, and this year 2019 was slightly below, but very comparable. So again, not a judgment call. I think the municipality has spent on capital asset additions when it's needed to. And then lastly, we just have a graph on capital asset additions by funding source. The gray is kind of unfinanced, so that would be kind of where you've taken out debt for capital asset additions. There's kind of reserves and reserve funds, this turquoisey color. Green is coming from other reserve, your obligatory reserve funds, and orange is really what's kind of coming from the tax base, and yellow is other. So just kind of explaining the funding of your capital asset additions over time and how that may change from one year to the next. So those are the graphs, but again, glad to answer any more questions the council may have.
So, Mr. Short, it looks like the patient is quite healthy.
Yes, yeah, again, strong cash position, good reserves and reserve funds, capacity for debt if needed, and so yeah, I would say so.
I know in previous years, previous councils, there was a concern about the level of reserves. I know there was some decisions taken in past councils to increase reserves, and it looks like we've continued to do that. And now we're at a healthy level for our reserves. Councillors, any further questions of Mr. Short at this moment? No. Yeah, very good presentation, sir. Do you have more for us?
Nope, that's it for me. Thanks. Unless there's any other questions.
Well, Madam Treasurer, did you wish to weigh in at this moment?
No, I think Mr. Short did an excellent job at presenting information to council. So, Your Worship, through you to council, the recommendation tonight is to accept and approve the financial statements as presented.
Very good. All right, Councillor Taylor, did you wish to speak or make that motion?
I wish to speak, and I can make that motion if it's all right, Your Worship. I just wanted to say to the public, if you're watching and you're wondering why 7 councillors aren't asking questions about such a document, it feels like we've been over this and under this quite a few times. I think we all have a very good understanding of where this is going, and a lot of thought has been put forth to get us to this point. So when I read through a lot of the things that we see, I'm not surprised by them. And to your point, Your Worship, I think the patient is very healthy. Certainly we can always do better, but at this point in time, there wouldn't be any further questions to have. I think the treasurer has done an excellent job, and we're in good shape. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, and it's also very nice to have the comparables of similar sized municipalities. I think that's really the scorecard that we're looking for, and the confidence in decision making that town staff has led us towards, and it's all been proven in these charts. So thank you very much. Councillor Sherwood, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a comment basically for the fact that we had almost a full year of a pandemic and we're sitting in a surplus for the end of the year. That's in itself is quite a significant accomplishment. Thank you, staff, for that.
Yes, and we did see a bump in the grants that the levels of government have been throwing our way. We've had our apron out to catch them all, and we appreciate the assistance. Although, we're going to have to pay the piper as taxpayers at some point from the provincial and federal, assistance that we've received. Ms. McKinney, I see you're on screen, and would you like to add to this?
Yes, through the mayor, I just wanted to build on the comments made by Councillor Sherwood. The treasurer was actually invited by the Ministry of Finance to give a presentation as part of a panel on best practices for COVID budgeting, which is something that we should all collectively be proud of, in addition to the awards that have been run recently by the budget. So thank you.
Yes, congratulations, Madam Treasurer. We know we're in very good hands with you, and again, congratulations to you and your team and the communications department for the documents that you are producing. They're easy for I think councillors to understand and read, and for the public. The graphics and the charts and things are very impactful, and we thank you and your team for putting this together for us. All right, Councillor Taylor, the motion would be to receive and approve the financial statements, correct? All right, we need a seconder for that. Councillor Andrews, any further comments or questions from councillors? All in favor?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Short. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. All the best.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. All right, moving on. We have item 11.2. We're welcoming our detachment commander, Inspector Terry Ward of the Dufferin Detachment of the OPP. Mr. Ward, welcome. Is your invitee, Mr. Sheehan, with us tonight?
I am. I'm here as well, Your Worship.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Sheehan. So, Mr. Ward, I'll turn things over to you, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll basically just kind of set the background, and then Mr. Sheehan can take it from there. One of the things I see within the town of Orangeville is an increase in traffic complaints. And one of the things that we can say until we have analytics to show whether it is a traffic complaint or it's a perceived traffic complaint. As we know, by someone standing on the side of the road, a vehicle going by at 40 or 50 kilometers an hour can look like it's going at an excessive speed. So moving forward with that, one of the things with the technology that's out there that we'd like to bring to Orangeville is what's called the Black Cat unit. And I mean, obviously, Mr. Sheehan will go into a more detailed what this is. But basically, you know, it's a radar device that's placed surreptitiously in a neighborhood, in a community, that tracks speeds and gives us hard analytics to say, yes, we have a problem, or no, we don't have a problem. And if there is a problem in that area with speeding, we then can look at putting resources towards it. As you know, in the town of Orangeville, we have a limited supply of resources on a day-to-day. Our calls for service are increasing, which ties up officers, which limits the amount of time we can throw at radar and traffic enforcement. So by having these devices, they give us hard analytics, hard data to show, do we have a problem? Okay, if we do, we need to force a plan and do the enforcement piece. And it's something that, again, Mr. Sheehan will go into more detail, but we can move consistently throughout town, gathering different types of analytics, using it that can help us deploy resources to these areas. We always talk about traffic calming measures, but sometimes we don't get a true analytic from traffic calming. So these units can be used to actually get us true data as to whether we have a speeding problem in neighborhoods, communities, and on main throughway roads too. So at that point, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sheehan to kind of explain what this Black Cat unit is all about.
Thank you,
Great.
Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. Thank you, Your Worship. If you don't mind, I'll share my screen with everyone just to give you an idea of a quick presentation. Okay. Hopefully we won't see a picture of a dancing dog, so just hang on a quick second. Okay. Okay, so basically what we've done at Northline, we're out of Port Perry, Ontario, just so you know where we are. We're a Canadian company. We've been around for a long time, multi-generational family company. But we created this program with the Black Cat specifically to address some of the concerns around community safety, speeding, and some other issues in our communities. The Black Cat units were originally created specifically for the engineering departments who have to do their annual AADTs. They need to know from an engineering standpoint the profile of the road. The Black Cat is such a powerful tool. It was able to sort of transfer over to community safety. And so we created this process that we have with the OPP and the RCMP. And it's basically a three-step process to understand if there is an issue when you're doing a study from a community safety. So our first step is what we call the study process, making our plan. Generally speaking, when we have an issue, it comes from a complaint, it comes from an observation, it can be from a stakeholder, it can be from a staff member, but we get an idea that there might be an issue on a street. And as Mr. Ward said, it's very difficult to sit at the side of the street and understand if there is a speeding car. So these devices are able to help us with that when we make our plan. Ideally, in getting the data that you require, we need to actually have the data to be as accurate as possible for the life of the road as it is. So the unit is very discrete. You can't really see it. It goes on the side of the road, and it gives a really good snapshot from a typical study, which tends to be around 7 days. There are instances where we need to do longer studies, but this device, it just sits at the side of the road. You don't even know it's there, and it gets a really good picture of what the traffic and the dynamics are doing. The equipment itself is called a Black Hat radar. You can see it's basically the size of a small toaster, quite literally straps to a pole. It's meant to give you data as far as an individual target by target, date and time stamped. So it can give us the time that the target went by. It can give us all sorts of other data as far as how long the target is, the gap for aggressive driving. And then when you need to download your data, you can actually come back and you can actually do it either through modem or through Bluetooth. This will give you an idea of what it looks like on the side of the road. So you'll see on the image on your left of your screen, you'll see one banded to a concrete pole. On the right-hand side, it's one that's attached to a utility pole. The unit is basically the radar head that you see on the right with a battery, locks up, and you really don't even see that it's there. To install the unit, just because it attaches to a pole, we tend to put it about 6 to 7 feet high, just to sort of keep it out of the hands of people who pass by. Most people are curious when they see it. Some municipalities have put high voltage stickers on them just to deter. Some have put stickers on them that say, just traffic studies. Others up in the Muskokas have actually gone through and graffitied them with the high school, just again to make them less appealing. But I'll give you an idea of how, I think you can see this video, hopefully, how quick it is. You just bolt that to the pole, slide the unit on it, and then we lock it to it, and that's all there is to attach it and deploy it from an officer's standpoint. Once you get the unit out there, you have your week-long study. Now you want to go back and get your data and get an idea of what's going on within your neighborhood. So from a reporting standpoint, we have a couple different types of reports that we can do. We have reports that are very specific for policing, which gives us an idea of a quick view reporting, so we can sort of see a snapshot of the area. We can also do best times of enforcement, and we can also create reports that we can share with stakeholders and different levels and different departments. So the first one, which is sort of the easiest one to look at, is a snapshot one. So this is a very easy graphic to look at. You can see a speedometer. You'll see what our posted speed limit is. You'll see it right here, and you'll get an idea of the tolerance. Do we have an issue in this particular area? And if we were to have a complaint on this area, we would say, actually, there's no need to do enforcement or education because after doing the study, we're well below the 85th percentile. Some of the other things that are interesting to look at on the left as far as the reporting goes is obviously it gives you where you're doing your study, but some of the other interesting stuff that you can start tracking is requested by. So whether it be a staff member, a counselor, it could be requested specifically by, again, a stakeholder that's maybe doing consistent requesting. You can start tracking this type of information when you're sharing it. So this is the same report again, different cross street. Now all of a sudden you'll see we are in a posted of 60, and we're now in what we consider a zone we may want to do some enforcement or education. You'll also notice down here, which shows our combined lanes, whether they're the 85th percentile where we sit. You'll see our approach lane and our receding lane. The Black Hat is meant to grab data on your roads that are approaching or receding over multi-lanes. So it doesn't matter if you're putting on a small 1 or 2 or even a rural road, it'll capture the traffic going through in all those instances. The other aspect here is the classification scheme, which allows you a tool that most people don't have. Again, engineers have the tool, but sometimes when you put together, it's quite fascinating. If you have a challenge, for example, on streets of maybe skidoo traffic, you may have a challenge with ATVs on roads. Well, we can start doing reporting where we can take length of vehicles and then we can compare it to possibly speed, so you can see what the dynamics of the road are. Likewise, if we have an issue with truck traffic, we have a neighborhood where there's either too much truck traffic and you want to identify if there's a truck traffic in a restricted area, or if the trucks are speeding, we can then start looking at classification by speed. And this will give you an example of that. So this is just a simple report you can push. It literally takes 2 buttons. This we get to define. We can do this up to what they call 13 bins. We've defined this into 3 bins. We've said, let's look at the length classification from 0 meters to 5 meters, from 5 to 10, and then 10 plus. And then it'll break down everybody's speed that they're doing in this particular, so we can get a good idea based on the size of the vehicle, the speed they're doing on the road. The other aspect that we have is now when we do our enforcement, we can actually say when is the best time to deploy our resources. So we can do something called a report for best time of enforcement. So based on some of the reports that we've done and the data you saw, you can see if it's on a Sunday, we're going to do in lane 1, which happens to be our approaching lane, from 4 to 6. In lane 2, it's 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. So when we're deploying resources, we can be very, very specific if they have this data. Oops, sorry about that. Basically, after you're done your study, what we encourage you to do as part of this plan is you do your study, you determine if there is an issue. If there is an issue, you table it. If there is an issue, you go out and you do education, you do enforcement, depending on what you want to do in that particular neighborhood. After that, 1, 2, 3 weeks later, we tend to redeploy the equipment to the exact same location to again see the dynamics. Has anything changed? Do we have positive results? Has the speeding dropped? Do we have negative results? Do we have to look at other solutions? Maybe some more aggressive enforcement. Maybe we need to look at traffic calming solutions. But once we actually get into that data that you can analyze, and when you're able to do that education and enforcement, then you can make the decision if you need speed signs, traffic calming, maybe some of the new license plate recognition tools that the province is starting to offer. We get a lot of information from people question about the Black Cat. This is more from a police standpoint when we're doing training as far as how they connect to their Black Cat and how they generate the reports. The OPP, you're actually able to generate all your reports on your tablet if you choose to, your cruiser tablets, and or you can have a secondary computer if you choose. From a pricing standpoint, the Black Cats, they're just under $3,600. The orange kit that we talk about is a field kit. Basically, it includes all of the chargers, the banding, the locks, all of the support equipment that goes with the Black Cat to make sure you can use it and maintain it. A DRU is a fancy word for a data retrieval unit. It's basically just a Windows-based laptop. If you opt for something like that, it's a support tool that we can actually help the people in the field with. So if they're in the field or having any challenges, we can actually remote into that specific computer and assist with it. If it's on their cruiser tablets, obviously for security reasons, they don't like people going into those to remote into to provide support. Part of the OPP Community Safety Program, it includes a license for TraxPro, which is a software that does all the setup, the configuration. It does all the reporting that you're looking on. And that's all included because the OPP made that investment a long time ago. Likewise is training. So we train the detachment. We also can train if you have municipal bylaw officers, if you have engineering people who want some of the data. The training it can be as inclusive as you want for people to get on board, to understand how they can use it, because the data is transferable, not just from a community safety standpoint, but other departments can really utilize this data on an ongoing basis. And that's basically us in a nutshell. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to take them. I'll see if I can turn the screen back over to you now.
Very good. Well, Mr. Sheehan and Mr. Ward, thank you very much for that presentation. I think it's exciting to see technology like this that can be put into the field and collecting data to make the police decisions, as I said, more efficient and target with the data retrieved from the field. So it looks like an excellent thing. So, councillors, any questions? I see Councillor Post, Sherwood, and Andrews. Let's go with Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Wonderful presentation. This is extremely exciting. I would argue that traffic concerns and community safety is probably the #1 email that I get from our residents, and I think that most of my fellow councillors would agree with that. So I think this looks wonderful. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Inspector Ward, would your thought, Inspector Ward, be to have one of these for the municipality, or would one be sufficient? And then I also have a second question, if I could, which I will add Mr. Jones onto, which would be, with the data that we could retrieve from something like this, would it transfer well to your department, Mr. Jones, and help once we have the traffic calming report back from the consultant to make some of those decisions? So those are my two questions. Thank you.
I'll answer your first question, Councillor Post. Ideally, for the size and the number of complaints we're getting within the town of Orangeville, it would be nice to have a minimum of two of the units, because as Mr. Sheehan said, like you're going to deploy it for probably 4 to 7 days. So it would be nice to have at least a minimum of 2 that we could, put them in different spots in town for sure. So my ask would be for 2 at this time.
Wonderful.
Mr. Jones, could you weigh in on the, average annual daily traffic numbers and such that can be gathered by this machine?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Post. As engineers, we love data, and we are trying to pull together this traffic calming policy. We now have a consultant in place for that. And as we move forward, they're going to be giving us a toolbox of different types of traffic calming that would be appropriate in different locations. This sort of data, as Inspector Ward was indicating, will let us know the extent of a problem in any given location and help us determine what the most appropriate measures would be at that location. So yes, this data would be excellent for us.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that.
Yep. Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor Andrews. Go ahead, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, I have 2 questions, one for Inspector Ward and one for Mr. Sheehan. Mr. Sheehan, can you, it looks to me like the figures that you provided, we would have to outright purchase. Does your company rent them? Like, do we provide leasing agreements?
We don't have leasing agreements. No, we do rent the units, but the units, frankly, are just too expensive to rent. If you rent the units for 2 or 3 months, you've basically purchased them, and there's no point in that, quite frankly.
So it sounds like it's a better option to just buy it outright and we own it, correct?
Correct. That's the honor. And if you do need to have a unit for a special program that might happen, you have a special event coming to town, we can just provide you with another unit for that 1 week, just while you're doing that type of study. But generally speaking, yes, that's what you're better to purchase the units outright.
Thank you very much. And Inspector Ward, my question to you is, I believe OPS previously had 1 designated officer and unit designated to traffic enforcement. Does the OPP currently have one officer designated for that? Or
through the mayor, you mean within the town of Orangeville?
Correct.
No, we do not.
Okay. I like this idea. As Councillor Post mentioned, one of the biggest phone calls I get is speeding and safety within the town. I would actually like to see 2 go for the police and 1 be used for our Public Works Department. I'm almost tempted to buy 3 just so that Public Works can use it for data for when we have all these neighborhoods complaining about speeding, but that the police could also use it for other reasons as well. So I'm almost inclined to go for 3, but that's me.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Mr. Sheehan, thank you very much for your presentation. I am intrigued. I was actually thinking of Ms. McKinney while the presentation was on, and the reason why is that she, through her department, has been spearheading, the smart city philosophy within the town, and analytics is really top of mind, I think, departmentally, not only in Mr. Jones' area, but also in hers. The question I do have is, was echoed by, Councillor Sherwood, is, if we ended up looking at purchasing 1 or 2 or 3, whatever the number is it the town's responsibility to set it up in locations or is it your company's role to set these up in various locations? Because again, once we take ownership of it, consultation with Inspector Ward, or there's an assumption, as Councillor Post was very clear, that many of us receive numerous complaints about concerns about speeding. Would that be something that it is the town's responsibility to set those up on the poles throughout the community?
Generally speaking, yes.
I can answer that. Yeah, I can answer that. I would like to see that the units would stay with the detachment in Orangeville, and I would assign an officer to be in charge of the units specifically. That officer would have the training on the downloading, on how to put it up. And that officer would be the one deployed to move it around, to put it into place, to do the downloads on it. So it's not, they're not going missing, they're not disappearing. We have one specific officer assigned to look after the unit itself, and they would be the ones to deploy it.
Okay, thank you very much, Inspector Ward, for that clarification.
If I can just add one thing, if you don't mind, to that, please. Like Councillor Sherwood had indicated, talking about, I'm not trying to push 3 units on you, but if you look at different townships, what they do is usually the detachment maintains control of them because they're the ones that are asked, and they get the ask consistently, and they see the neighborhoods, and maintaining the equipment is critical. But I do also know that municipalities have other ones in-house that they are using for AADT, they are using them for quick responses, but they keep the data still to the OPP. So they save it to their shared drive, they save it so they can share it, so the OPP then can actually still have that data to keep their track of all of their records. You can use it for the councillor side, but sharing the data is the critical part here.
Very good.
Thank you for that clarity.
Mr. Sheehan, could you just recap the total cost of 1 unit?
Total cost of 1 unit would be $35.95 for the actual physical unit, $429 for your Orange kit, and then you have an optional laptop that you can purchase with it. But the laptop, you only need 1 laptop per 5 units. If you are looking at multiple units, at 5, the price goes down by $395 a unit.
Okay, very good. Councillor Peters, did I see your hand up, sir? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yep. Through you to Mr. Sheehan, I'm going to follow the 2-question theme here. The first is whether or not the units pick up on bidirectional traffic. In one of your slides, it looked like it was sort of pointed in one direction. The second one is, what's the lifespan or warranty on the product?
So the first, yes, we do. It does pick up bidirectional traffic. As I mentioned before, it's target by target, bidirectional, and it detects in a 35-meter range. So if you have 2, 3, or 4 lanes, it will give you approaching or receding up to that 35 meters and place it accordingly. As far as warranty goes, it's a full 1-year warranty on it. We service everything here in Ontario. We haven't had issues with the units. Any sort of issues we've had, unfortunately, right now, be very frank, have been with our cruiser tablets that you're using. There are some software issues that we're still working through. Causes a bit of grief here and there. That's why we've created this laptop for people to use. The cruiser tablets do work, but there's hiccups from time to time where they'll lock up when you're actually connecting to your unit. One thing, though, I'd just like to quickly point out is with Councillor Andrews, you're talking about smart cities. This is our Black Hat, specifically meant for detection of vehicles, trucks, transports, and so forth. But within the smart city, we actually have other products that can detect cyclists, can detect pedestrians on walkways. So when you're within the smart city, if there's other solutions that you need, which you can talk about at a later date, we have those as well.
Councillor Peters, did you want to follow up?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, thanks. Mr. Sheehan, just wondering, I mean, they look like fairly robust units and they haven't been around long enough to fail at any length of time, I'm sure, but could we expect to get 5 years out of a unit, 10 years? What's your thought there?
Yes, I can be more specific there. These are the second generations of the Black Hat. The first generations came out in 2003, which are still in the marketplace. This particular generation came out in 2008. We have conservatively several hundred of them out with no issues. We've had, without exaggerating, 2 units that have been stolen in that time frame. One was shot with a crossbow and we found later. Another one just nobody's found ever since. Generally speaking, if people want to get it, they will. But knock on wood, we've only had 2. As far as from a service standpoint and anything going wrong, if something happens to go wrong with the electronics, it usually happens within the first 15 days. We burn the products in here beyond that, so we tend not to have an issue when they go on the road. After about 3 to 5 years, there's an internal battery inside that needs to be replaced. So basically, you send it back to us at that point in time. It's $75. We take the battery out, we recalibrate the unit, and we ship it back to you. And that's really all there is. It's meant to last for years and years and years and years and years, and which they are doing.
Great, thank you.
Very good. Deputy Mayor McIntosh and then Councillor Taylor. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I didn't have a question. I was going to make a motion to purchase 2 of these units.
Very good. I just wanted to ask Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones, you've got two departments here. I guess we have our police service as one. Do you feel a need or is this something that would be useful for your department?
Through your worship, the short answer is yes. I see this as being useful, particularly coming out of the traffic calming study. We don't have a current allowance for this in our budget. It's not something that we included in this year's budget. However, it is a fairly low dollar amount item. I'd suggest that perhaps it's something that could be considered as part of the 2022 budget coming out of the traffic calming study. This could be one of the tools that we could be using to assist us with moving forward with those sorts of analyses.
Very good. That's a good recommendation. I think it's cumbersome to try and share something. I think these are specifically for the OPP's use. So, but I wanted to ask that question, and perhaps if you'd like to reach out during budget times, I think council would be interested in hearing that. So, thank you, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. At the last Police Services Board meeting, Inspector Ward eloquently waxed on about these devices, and I think we all came to an agreement in that meeting that this was the right thing to do. And he announced that he was coming to council to share this. So the Police Services Board is in support of this device. I think it'll be a great thing for us to have. And I guess I would fall in line with what Mr. Jones is saying, and would wish to second the motion put forward by Deputy Mayor McIntosh, and that is for 2. I don't think we need to go forward with a third one at this point. We should really leave these with Inspector Ward for now. And quite honestly, we're such a small town that if Mr. Jones or a fellow member of council wanted to use one, I'm sure that the inspector would work with us and set up a location. And the last thing I'd just like to say is kind of a shameless plug, but if we could, I'd love to see Drew Brown, Cedar, and Spencer covered off fairly quickly on these things to see what's happening on those 3 streets.
I would add College.
Very good. Well, I'm sure the inspector will take those into consideration as he thinks about deploying this. It sounds like we've got consensus here. Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor Post. Go ahead, Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, I will support the motion by my fellow council members for the 2. I'm personally ready for 3. I think the whole idea of having our own, the Public Works having our own for other municipal needs is something that, to me, I think is very important. We have been had many discussions with Mr. Jones regarding traffic over these last term of council, and I can tell you that it will definitely be used. So I will support tonight the purchasing of 2 for OPP, but very much encourage and will be looking forward to this coming. I personally don't want to even see it wait till 2022 for them, but again, maybe we'll put a motion through when the traffic study comes later on this year.
Very good. It's interesting, Councillor Sherwood, the average annual daily traffic counts, I think, are only done every 5 years or so. So they're already out of date. So if Public Works wants some accurate information on traffic counts to perhaps assist in a decision to put a stop sign in or anything like that, this would be a valuable tool for them to gather that accurate current information going forward. So Councillor Post, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just one more question through you to Mr. Sheehan. I noticed that you had talked about the software that was included and the licensing is included for that. Is there any annual fee for us for licensing of the software, or does that stay with us for the lifespan of the unit?
That stays with you. There's no cost, there's no annual fees, no downloads. It's just the software. I will forewarn you a bit, though. The software that we have with the OPP is an older version of the software. They have upgraded it. I do not encourage anybody to go to the upgrade. This current software is the best to stay with, and you already own it. So there's no point in purchasing something you don't need.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So, councillors, we have a motion on the floor to purchase, and again, maybe we can get some a decision from our treasurer. Where would we take this money from? Reserve fund, Madam Treasurer? If she's available. Maybe Mr. Brennan would like to weigh in.
Your Worship, we'll probably just cover it off through corporate allocations.
Okay. Madam Treasurer? Corporate allocations. Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, councillors, I think that was a great presentation. I think it's a valuable tool. The cost is, fairly reasonable, and want to thank Mr. Sheehan and Mr. Ward for bringing this to our attention. Before we close off, I just wanted to give Inspector Ward a moment to talk to the public and to councillors about, the calls that are received and the correct channels through which these calls should be brought to the attention, the complaints about traffic, and just if you could talk about the protocol and how you'd like to see it operate, Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm kind of beating this to death, but I'm just afraid of the liability end of things. I mean, 9 out of 10 times when these complaints come in and they go to a counselor, they go to a member, there might be a delay in it getting to the police, and that's fine. But I'm afraid of that one time when it's a public safety issue that they've routed through somebody else rather than calling directly to the police. So the only message I have out there is, if it's a public safety issue, that I ask that people call the police directly. Let us generate an occurrence. Let us deal with it. Let us do the investigation or the enforcement or the education piece. That's what we're there for. So, my message to that is just, if you have a complaint, call the police.
Right. And maybe as a follow-up, Mr. Ward, you have a communications officer. I'm wondering whether there should be some further outreach to the public about that specifically. I mean, there's a few people watching tonight, but I know you've got channels of communications that people are receiving information from various reports. So perhaps, it's a suggestion you could do that.
We just recently sent out a press release in reference to that.
Oh, very good.
Again, I don't want to continue to harp on that. I'm hoping that, we educate enough that the tide starts to turn a bit. And again, like I said, my concern is public safety, and I want us to be on top of that.
Absolutely. Ms. McKinney, did you wish to speak to this at all?
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to follow up on the question related to Smart City that Councillor Andrews started to ask. I know that I've talked about bringing forward a presentation on the Smart City work, which will be happening in fairly short order. There is a smart traffic monitoring, it's not as portable as the one brought forward tonight, but that Mr. Jones and I have been discussing with Mr. Hall. And so that will be included in that presentation as something that we expect to do inside this year that is funded through the efficiency funds. I just don't want you to be caught off guard if we come back in a month with that and then that wasn't clear tonight. It's not portable, but it will do similar things.
Excellent. We're looking forward to that information. Thank you, Ms. McKinney. Okay, Councillor, so we're going to vote on this motion. All in favor? All right. Mr. Ward, please follow up with town staff and let's get these things ordered.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye now. All right. Moving on to 11.3. So this, for the public, the Solicitor General of Ontario has reached out to municipalities to get information on OPP, Police Service Board under OPP detachments. It's a complex issue with a lot of opinions. I think the several municipalities within Dufferin County, there's varying thoughts about it. There's been some further information provided by AMO, and my thoughts talking to the CAO and the clerk this morning is that we really need to have a more fulsome discussion about this, and it was my recommendation that we have a further special meeting to give this a little bit more intense scrutiny that it requires, and that we should, in order to put together hopefully some consensus amongst councillors to send a notice to the Solicitor General and what our opinion is as a group with respect to how detachment boards should be constituted once the new Policing Act comes into play in early 2022. So my suggestion, councillors, is that we defer this to a special meeting. I know most of us have weighed in on this, and we'd like to have that meeting in the next couple of days, and then we'll be, informing the public of what our collective, recommendation will be to the Solicitor General. So I'm just asking council to skip 11.3, and we'll get to it in due course in the next couple of days. So let's move on to staff reports now. We have 12.1 new business.
Mayor?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry, if we could just have a motion to defer that presentation,
okay.
And then note of the date and time, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, very good. So thank you, Madam Deputy Clerk, Carolina Khan. So we need a motion to defer this item 11.3 to Wednesday, June the 2nd at noon. We will have a special meeting, and we'll have a fulsome discussion amongst ourselves about this issue. Councillor Peters. That motion? Thank you. Seconded by? Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Very good. Thank you. All right, moving on to staff reports again. It's always interesting to hear reports from our economic development staff about new businesses that have come to Orangeville, and we have a number of new businesses that have started in the midst of COVID between February 1st and April 30th. So this is a recommendation that report CMS 2021-013 dated May 31st, 2021 be received. May I have a motion to receive this report? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Post. Any councillors wish to comment on this? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. As I've done before, when this report comes out, especially in these times, I want to congratulate those who have elected to invest in business startups in our community, especially during the pandemic, and thrilled to see the numbers that are growing and the diversity of the businesses that also are represented in this report. So I just wanted to congratulate those that have elected to do so. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any further comments, councillors? All right, we have a motion to receive this. All in favor?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Item 12.2. This is an item regarding demolition, which a building at 22 John Street, which is on the Municipal Heritage Register property. I believe this is the one that is the demolition of a detached garage, and that there's a plan to build quite a nice replacement of that garage from the report. So this is a recommendation that report INS 2021-035, 22 John Street, demolition on a Municipal Heritage Registry property, be received, and the council not oppose the demolition of the detached garage on the property. May I have a motion? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Peters. Sorry, Councillor Taylor. I apologize, Councillor Taylor. Any further comments on this, councillors? Seeing none. All in favor?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. 12.3. Again, another demolition permit application for 14 William Street. A recommendation that report INS 2021-036, 14 William Street, a residential permit application, file number RD 2021-01 be received, and that the residential demolition permit application for 14 William Street be approved, subject to the following conditions. That the applicant allows Heritage Orangeville access to the subject property to document the existing structure and any existing historical elements on the property prior to demolition, that the owner salvages for reuse any significant architectural artifacts or building materials as may be identified by Heritage Orangeville, and provide such artifacts to the town or Museum of Dufferin if requested, and that the applicant constructs and substantially completes the new dwelling to be erected on the subject property not later than 2 years from the date of the issuance of the demolition permit. May I have a motion to approve this, please, and receive? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Any further comments, councillors, on this item? All in favor?
Yes.
Very good. 12.4, a temporary road closure request for the Peaceful Walk for Diversity Awareness Walk. This is a recommendation that the report INS 2021-038 dated May 31st, 2021, a temporary road closure request for the Peaceful Walk for Diversity Awareness be received, and the council pass a bylaw to authorize the temporary road closure of Broadway between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. on June 13th, 2021 for a peaceful walk for diversity awareness. We are aware that provincial regulations may preclude that date, and town staff has notified me that we already have a bylaw in place to allow town staff to make a decision and change that date if required because of COVID restrictions. So councillors, could we have a motion to approve this and also to direct staff to change the date if necessary due to COVID restrictions? Motion, please. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Peters. Councillor Post, did you want to talk to this if you would? And sorry, Councillor Sherwood, you wish to speak as well? Okay, Councillor Post and Councillor Sherwood, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I did speak with the organizer, Patty Thomas, today, and because of the current plan, the Reopening Ontario plan, this walk would not be permitted during phase 1 or phase 2 with the gathering limits. So she's advised me that her and her committee are meeting tonight. They are postponing the event for sure. She has not advised me yet of the new date. I had suggested to her that perhaps moving it to August would be ideal because hopefully then we will be in phase 3 and it will be a permitted time. Mr. Jones, I'm not sure if you wanted to weigh in on moving forward the road closure and what's required exactly from a procedural point. But at this point, June 13th will not be happening, and I will advise council as soon as Ms. Thomas can let me know.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Post. My understanding is that the bylaw that's going to be passed this evening to permit the road closure will leave the date open for staff to put in. And if that's what council approves, then certainly we'll continue to work with Councillor Post and the organizers of this event to ensure that it moves forward as planned.
Very
on
good.
On a date that comes later.
Thank you. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I would assume that this Peaceful Walk for Diversity Awareness has replaced what happened last year under the Black Lives Matter umbrella. So my thought was, I know myself and fellow member, several of the council members participated in that walk. And last year we walked from Wellington Street to First Street. This is quite a short distance that they're saying Wellington to 2nd Street. Was that the request of the committee to just go to 2nd Street this year? Because that's a very short distance. Wellington to 2nd, where last year we went Wellington to 1st and came back.
It should be to First Street.
So it's mentioned several places within the report to 2nd Street.
Mr. Jones, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that in the conversation that we had with Ms. Thomas, it was going to be the exact same road closures that we had last year for the Black Lives Matter protest walk.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Post, that's correct. The information that I had was that the closure was between Wellington and 2nd Street, and that is what we discussed when the group of us met. If that is different, then we should meet again to ensure that we've got the right distance set out in the bylaw.
Well, so it sounds to me like we should defer this matter then for because there's no pressure here on June 13th, and perhaps Councillor Post and Mr. Jones can have a meeting with Ms. Thomas and others and come back to us at our next meeting to finalize the route, and hopefully we'll know more about the date by then. Does that make sense, Councillor Post?
Yep, that's fine by me.
All right, so I think we should probably have a motion to defer this. Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All right, all in favor? Very good, thank you. Moving on to 12.5, this is a recommendation that the council receive report CPS 2021-032, funding for 2020 WSIB surcharge, and approve the use of funds from other budget lines to cover an amount of $71,571.86 overage from the WSIB surcharge. The outstanding balance is due July 1st, 2021 to avoid interest charge. May I have a motion to approve this, councillors? Councillor Post, second by Councillor Sherwood. Further discussion or questions? So, Councillor Sherwood.
Yeah, I'm confused. The opening of the recommendations is talking to cover an amount of $71,571.86 overage from the surcharge. But yet, if I read down further in the report, it looks to me like we have to pay $422,000. So why am I thinking we're only trying to cover $71,000 from the opening recommendations, but yet it looks like we're going to be paying $422? Am I misunderstanding something?
Madam Treasurer, you have something to add. That must be, oh, Ms. McKinney, that must be the bulk amount for the year, and that we're short 71,000. Is that right, Ms. McKinney? Sorry. You're muted, ma'am.
Of course. I'll start, and then if the treasurer wants to add on that, through the mayor, the total surcharge is $422,000. The suggestion is that the delta between what we have in our WSIB reserve and a rebate we're receiving from the WSIB, and that is the difference of the amount at the top, be covered through additional funds.
Okay. So does that satisfy you, Councillor Sherwood? We're short 71,000, correct, Ms. McKinney?
Yes.
Okay.
So you're wanting to bump it up by taking 100,000 under a contingency reserve, but we're only going to be using 71,000 of that 100,000?
Kathy on the line. I don't know if Kathy's able to. Kathy has her hand up.
Aye. Kathy, go right ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. Thank you for having me this evening. Yeah, so the amount that we're short is 71,000. One of the suggestions was that we don't drain the WSIB reserve fund totally, and that we do ask for 100 from the contingency fund so that we can have some left in the WSIB reserve.
Okay.
Alternative, either one would work. Like if we just want to go for the 71, that's the minimum we need. But the other alternative the other alternative would be to ask for the 100 so that we can leave a little bit in the slush fund for other purposes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, Councillor Sherwood,
Yeah, I just don't know why we wouldn't have said, okay, let's take 230,000 out of the WSIB reserve and 70 out of the contingency, but I guess it works out the same. The math works out the same.
Madam Treasurer. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, that's okay, Your Worship. So through you to Councillor Sherwood and the rest of council. So the WSIB reserve is meant for events like this. And so given that the shortfall was 71 and as Kathy explained, taking 100,000 out of our contingency, which again is the reserve that is meant for events like this, it would actually put back a little bit of money into that reserve that we are draining. That is in the WSIB. So hence the way we presented the table, that's a more holistic way of going about this.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Peters, did you have your hand up, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the treasurer, and maybe I'm just getting caught on the wording here, but is there a typical line item on a given year for WSIB? And if so, what is that number compared to our reserve? If we've been building this up over time and we've sort of lost it in one shot, Is there, am I mixing up the terms here? Is the reserve just the amount that we've put on an annual basis, or is that something that's been accumulating for some time?
Through your worship to Councillor Peters, yes. So we do build up these reserves on an annual basis. So we do have a certain amount that we put away. I don't have the amount exactly in front of me right now, but the concept is every year through taxation, we do put away a certain amount towards building not just the WSIB reserve, but similar reserves.
Right. Okay. I guess this is building on Councillor Sherwood's question just about the amounts. This is the first time I think this term we've had a WSIB sort of monetary issue, and it seems unusual that the entire reserve would go away in one shot, but perhaps that's just my inexperience with the claims process.
Ms. McKinney.
So not to speak to the financial components of it, certainly that's the treasurer's area, but through the mayor to Councillor Peters, yes, typically the town has done fairly well and not had these types of surcharges. We have this surcharge because of 2 large claims in 1 year, and the WSIB is actually changing the model so that we wouldn't have this type of experience again in the future. It would be more predictable in advance. I don't know if the treasurer has anything she'd like to add.
Madam Treasurer?
Nothing at the moment.
Okay, thank you. All right, councillors, well, we have a recommendation that we approve the use of funds from other budget lines to cover this. May I have a motion on this? Yeah.
It's already been moved and seconded, I think, Mr. Mayor.
We did? Okay, my apologies. Any further comments, councillors? All in favor? Thank you. All right, moving on to 12.6. This is a 2021 community grants update and a recommendation that the report CPS 2021-045 dated May 31st, 2021, the 2021 community grants update be received and the council approve distribution of 2021 community grant budgeted funds of $4,500. May I have a motion for this, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Sherwood and then Councillor Taylor. Go ahead. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. So I would think if I'm looking in the background and analysis of this, if the letter was after the original application, I think we should only be giving them the $500. Because if I look in the background, it says we received an application on May 7th to the Headwaters Food and Farming Allowance. On May 7th, the organization asked for 1,000, but on May 10th, they sent a letter asking for 500. So I'm thinking we should only be giving them 500 because their second request is less than their first. Am I reading this right? So if you look in the body, it says the 7th, we received a request for 1,000, but on the 10th, we received a letter asking for 500. So I'm saying we give them the 500 based on their second request.
Well, I don't know the timing of this. Councillor Peters, did you have some knowledge of this?
Not in particular, but I'm wondering if the date of May 10th is in reference to our council meeting, not the date of the actual letter itself. So we're not comparing the dates of the 2 letters per se, but we were presented with the original request on the 10th. That agenda would have been prepared well in advance, and I believe in the meantime, the amount was updated to 1,000. So I believe that the second and most recent request was the 1,000.
Okay. All right, Councillor Taylor, you had your hand up as well, sir.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess I just wanted to, I don't know, regroup us as we go through, and I was looking at the eligibility requirements, and to me, it's always about, are we following the process? And this process it's become a little bit different because we used to approve all at once. And then we've morphed to this, as groups send it in, and, you feel like you need to look through and see. So I do think the process is okay. As we look down the side at the left of what we're trying to prove. I don't know a lot about the Headwaters Food and Family Alliance, so shame on me for not knowing that group. I'm certainly familiar with the other ones and have been with the other groups that come as well. So maybe it's a good thing that a group that I'm not as intimate with is doing things in the community. Anyway, it's just a bit of a different process. I'm okay with it, but it is unique and new. And I guess the only one on here that I think is strange as you go through it is Celebrate Your Awesome in particular. And it calls out that they have a track record providing value to the community for the funding received. And I assume it's NA because you can't measure it. But I certainly saw value in it. I mean, I've attended the event. I've enjoyed the event. I saw groups interacting in ways they might not necessarily do on a normal basis. So I think it was successful. I guess it's just we can't provide an ROI, hence it's an NA. But anyway, I think we just need to keep questioning ourselves as we do this and whether or not we're all still comfortable with the process. But that's an odd one to me. But I'd still approve. I don't have an issue. I just think we should be aware.
Okay. Madam Treasurer, did you wish to speak?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Taylor, there's a couple of points. So first of all, the process was approved through council. I believe back in 2019, both Ms. McKinney and I brought an updated policy which allowed different groups to provide their application throughout the year. So the deadline was more rolling in nature. So that was approved through council. And the second point I would like to make in terms of some of the criteria. So when we ask individuals or groups in this case to fill out the application, these are the questions that we ask on the application for them to answer directly to us. So with the Awesome group, again, I don't have the application in front of me. Perhaps their answer was to the effect that, NA or they cannot provide us a direct answer. So what you see in front of you in terms of that table is essentially a summarized verbatim of what they have applied or what they have provided us through the application. So I just wanted to highlight that to Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Your worship, if I may.
Yes, go ahead, sir.
I think as I put this together, I think that might be because they haven't applied for funding previously, and maybe that's why they don't have a track record. Would that be fair? Yeah. Maybe that's what that one's about.
Okay. We do have a motion on the floor here on this. So any further discussion, councillors, before you vote?
Just may I say one other thing? Sure. Yeah, I also think the big important piece here for us is, membership or registrants comprised of Orangeville residents. So this is coming from Orangeville taxpayers to fund Orangeville events by, the majority of Orangeville people. And according to this, it meets all of those objectives. So I think that's spot on with what we're trying to accomplish as a council, and therefore no issue. But that needs to be the criteria as we go forward.
Yeah. All right, councillors, all in favor?
Yes.
Very good. Okay, I guess we can notify Councillor Post that she can come back in. Very good. All right, moving on. We've got 12.7. This is a recommendation that report CPS 2021-013, proposed fees and charges, the Clerk's Division be received, and that council pass a bylaw to implement the fees outlined in report CPS 2021-013. May I have a motion to approve this? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any councillors wish to speak to this matter? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Taylor?
It's just the rates are a deal in my estimation. Like, this is not a for-profit center for the town. It's a cost recovery piece, and it's a screaming deal in my mind. So just wanted to make that point. It's cheap.
Yeah, very good. All right, councillors, all in favor?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Moving on to 12.8, this is terms of reference for the Men's Homelessness Committee. Recommendation that report CPS 2021-043 regarding the creation of a Men's Homelessness Committee be received, and that terms of reference for a Men's Homelessness Committee as outlined in report CPS 2021-043 be approved, and that staff proceed with the recruitment of members. May I have a motion on this, please? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any further comments, councillors? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. I'm glad to see that the terms of reference have been provided, and I would like to put my name forward to be included in this committee.
Very good. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. I also would like to express interest to be on this. I had the opportunity to sit in and have some discussions with Pastor Matt and Mr. Carter as well on Burnside, and this is something I think I'd be very interested in as well.
Very good. All right, so in the terms of reference, councillors, was the mayor and 2 councillors to be added to the committee along with some public members. Any other councillors wish to put their foot forward other than Andrews and Sherwood? Seeing none. Okay, so I guess we can proceed with this motion to include the addition of councillors Andrew and Sherwood and the mayor, and to direct staff to begin the process of recruiting members from the public. All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. We have now 12.9, a signed variance application for 215 Centennial Road, the Dollarama store. A recommendation that report CPS CL 2021-46 regarding signed variance application for Dollarama 215 Centennial be received. And that the council grant a variance to the sign bylaw as amended to permit 5 window signs at 215 Centennial, covering 100% of the storefront windows, which exceeds the 25% coverage permitted in the bylaw, and that the variance approval be conditional on the applicant obtaining a sign permit. May I have a motion on this, please? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Post. Any councillors wish to comment on this? Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I found this one interesting in that it seems that one of the complaints was sort of based on the heat aspects, perhaps the comfort of the store, obviously being a large window area, that sort of thing. On one hand, I think the sign bylaw is in place for a reason, and adhering to it would make some sense. On the other, obviously, you know, the signs would be much more appealing than the current state of the windows. But I guess the point I want to make is that the larger problem here perhaps is in, you know, the way the designs or the buildings are designed and operated. And I don't think this sign is necessarily going to fix that problem. And I would rather see, you know, if that is the root cause of the issue, improvements made to the infrastructure to solve that problem, rather than sort of pasting over it with a sign. So I'm not going to get in the way of it here. I just don't think this will solve the problem. And now we're deviating from current bylaw. So it, you know, there's a bit of a can of worms here. And I wish the proposed solution was a little more robust.
Yeah, I'm concerned of the precedents that it sets as well. And, you know, most towns that are in the sort of, you know, the tourism business, if you look at their bylaws, they're fairly restrictive on signage. However, this particular store is in what you would call, you know, an urban shopping center and not in our downtown core or on one of our major thoroughfares. The signage is facing the parking lot and not facing a roadway. I think, you know, perhaps, you know, this should maybe be permitted, but I certainly don't think that we would want to extend that to stores facing major thoroughfares. I mean, in my opinion, again, speaking from some experience of 30 years in the sign business, less is more in signage, in my opinion. When you cover your storefront with a cacophony, it doesn't work. It's ugly. And if you think of most convenience stores that have got, you know, 50 signs put up willy-nilly all over the place, they're not very attractive looking stores. And you know, just to sell another Pepsi or an ice cream bar, anyway, I think restricting signage is actually more helpful to the owner. I think they need to focus on driving people into their stores in other ways, and they need to have an attractive storefront. And covering it with signs is not, in my opinion, the way to go. But this is a different situation. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree 100% with you. Excuse me. I just look at what's there now and figure anything's got to be an improvement. So that's why I was supporting this.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we'll have to look at these individually as they come up for variances. I know town staff has already done some homework here before they bring it to us. So, but yeah, Councillor Taylor, you got your hand up, sir.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It's such a quagmire, this dilemma, but the reality is we've turned down other smaller businesses for signs and not been able to give it to them. It seems odd to give it to a major corporation as well. I do agree the building could look nicer, but I think as I listen to the discussions and whatnot, I guess I'm going to have to vote no, just based on the fact that we have to be consistent with this, and this sign bylaw is going to continue to be challenged. And unless we're willing to open up the sign bylaw, which I don't know that there's a benefit to us to do so at this point, I don't know how you can go outside of what's already written.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, any further comments, councillors? All right, so we have a motion on the floor to approve this variance. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Taylor, Sherwood, and Peters in opposition. The motion passes. Thank you. All right, correspondence. We've got a number of correspondence. 13.1 through 13.6 are in with respect to the matter that we will talk about in our special meeting coming up. These are correspondence based on Police Service Board composition received from a number of local jurisdictions and as well as the Orangeville Police Services Board. May we have a motion to receive all of this correspondence, please?
Oh, no.
Sorry, Councillor Sherwood, you had a comment?
I was going to ask that they all be deferred to our special meeting with regarding the and particularly, in Your Worship, in all fairness, I volunteer every Monday afternoon at the food bank. I got this documentation emailed as in like 13.5 and 13.6 late in the day. I literally came home to try and do a quick change. I haven't had a chance to read it and absorb it. And I think because they're all related to policing and you're calling a special meeting, why can't we defer them all to have discussion at that time?
Well, I guess the motion to receive the correspondence is, is that, should we be putting that off? I mean,
well, I don't want to receive something that I haven't.
You haven't read. I
haven't read.
I get it. I certainly know that some of this came in late, for sure, and that's part of the reason why we're pushing this off for a couple of days, so we have a chance to, digest it all. So I was literally
reading your report as the meeting was going on, so that was a little bit stress for me.
Well, I thought that flash of light was the hockey game you had on there, Councillor Sherwood.
So,
well, I get what you're saying. I think that's a good point. We haven't had a chance to review some of this documentation, and perhaps we should defer it until Wednesday. So
because I have quite a bit of notes regarding 13.6 that I don't know. Do we want to discuss now, or should we wait until we're talking all about policing?
Oh, I absolutely think we should wait until Wednesday. Yeah, Councillor Peters, you had your hand up, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I understand Councillor Sherwood's point. I think at least though 13.1 through 4 as part of the main agenda package should be received now, so it aligns with the expectations of the meeting, and that material was provided earlier. So I would only support 0.5 and 0.6 being deferred.
Okay, Madam Deputy Clerk is online here, Madam.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, if I could just suggest if maybe you want to defer this, all of it as a complete package to the Wednesday meeting, that might be just, I guess, cleaner in a sense. So if that could all be addressed at the Wednesday meeting, that would be fine if that's acceptable.
Okay, Well, Madam Deputy Clerk is suggesting that we defer all 6 items to Wednesday. Councillor Sherwood is suggesting that. Councillor Peters was, thinking we could take in some of them, but I would like to align with the Deputy Clerk on this. So, Councillor Sherwood, did you want to make a recommendation that we defer 13(1) through 6?
Yes, I would, Your Worship, defer them until to the special meeting on Wednesday.
All right. Seconder would be Councillor Andrews. All right. All in favor of deferring those items? Opposed? Councillor Taylor. All right, sir. 13.7. This is a report from Georgian College. Very interesting report on the economic impact of Georgian College. May we have a motion to receive this, please? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any further comments on this particular item, councillors? All right. All in favor of receiving this? Thank you. Item 14, we have a number of minutes of committee and boards. This is with respect to Heritage Orangeville's meetings of January 21st, February 18th, March 18th, April 22nd, as well as a meeting of December 15th, 2020 of the Orangeville Police Services Board. May we have a motion to receive these minutes, please? Councillor Sherwood, second by Councillor Peters. Any comments on these minutes? All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. Notices of motion prior to meeting, I see none. Any notices of motion at meeting? Councillor Peters, I've got Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Councillor Peters first. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. At tomorrow's Sustainable Orangeville Committee, we'll be discussing the next steps in the tree canopy target and sort of tree management throughout the town, building on some of the previous discussions regarding tree protection bylaws and investment in the canopy in town. So it's likely that there will be a motion coming out of that meeting that would drive a motion for the June 14th meeting.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I'll be bringing forward a motion at the next meeting. I believe it's the 14th, and I won't read the whole thing. I'll just give you a quick go. Be it resolved that staff be directed to install a stop sign for the purpose of establishing a safe location for a pedestrian crossing on Rolling Hills Drive, no later than September 3rd, 2021, prior to the commencement of the 2021-22 school year. The location of the stop sign will be determined by staff, taking into consideration the safest and most efficient location for pedestrians to cross the road. That'll be coming on the 14th.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. All right. Any new business, councillors? Councillor Andrews.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to inform council and also the general public. This will actually be highlighted on the town's Facebook page from my understanding, but the DCCRC, which is the Dufferin County Cultural Resource Circle, is going to commemorate National Indigenous Peoples Day with a virtual education event, which will be held on Saturday, June 19th at 2 p.m. Some of the activity, even respecting the protocols by the province, will be conducted at the Healing Garden, which is located on the northwest corner of the Alder Street Recreation Complex, and more information is to come.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any other new business, councillors? Seeing none. Madam Deputy Clerk, any questions from the public?
No questions on the line.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 19. We have a recommendation. The bylaws listed below be read 3 times and finally passed. A bylaw to amend bylaw 2008-102, being a bylaw to license, regulate, and govern mobile food and refreshment vending in the town. A bylaw to temporarily close Broadway from 2nd Street to Wellington Street on June 13th, 2021. Are we going to amend that or defer that? Councilors? I think we voted to defer it, I believe, did we not? Okay, so let's leave that one. Well, let's have a vote to defer this particular item 19, the bylaw to temporary close Broadway from 2nd to Wellington. Make a motion, Councillor Peters, Councillor Taylor, all in favor? Thank you. That leaves us with 2 other bylaws to approve tonight. Again, the one governing mobile food and refreshment vending, and then the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council, the corporation of the town of Orangeville at its regular and closed council meeting held on May 31st, 2021. We have a motion for those 2 bylaws, please. Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. And a motion to adjourn. Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
All the best.
Night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Night all.
Good night.
Night.